Welcome to the show. It's springtime's coming around. There's a lot of good energy in the air, and like I was saying, I'm just happy to have you on. I was trying to get you on before, but it's hard sometimes, right? When everyone's got different things going
Mhm.
on. And for the people watching, this is Lauren. She's a dancer and a lot of other things. I'm trying to get the full story of
Yeah.
what you do.
Mm.
I see you doing a lot of great things for the community, the dance community, but also like breaking out into other types of just movements that you're creating. So tell me a little bit about your work and like some of the things that you're currently doing now, and how you guys started.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. It's an honor to be able to talk about my journey, especially with you, because you've definitely been a huge stamp here in the DMV. But for those that don't know me, my name's Lauren and I reside in Alexandria. And I am a woman who does many things. And if it interests me, I'm going to go for it. So when the pandemic arrived, I got creative. And like a lot of us, it forced us to pause and to really think about, yo, I don't have to be running a million miles a minute. I don't have to be 50 million places all the time. And I got a taste of that when the pandemic arrived, when all my classes had to stop and all my gigs had to pause. Because before the pandemic, I was teaching about 12 to 13 classes a week, yoga, bar, meditation, dance, and running the Lions Den, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. Um, but I had always been interested in coaching. I think people in the community and people in my spaces have kind of always viewed me in that way. I think because when you're running events and
Mhm.
you're bringing people together, you're kind of put in that position. And so I pursued life coaching during the pandemic. I went and got my certification, and that really opened up a lot of doors. And at the same time, I launched my podcast, Thrive and Thread, August of 2020. So what I saw was like these new pathways, pathways were opening up in my world where I could use my voice and also make income from it. And for those that don't know, beyond dance, like I'm yoga certified, I'm mindfulness certified, I'm positive psychology certified, meaning that I've done a lot of these trainings to learn more about wellness and how the brain works and how we as humans show up in the world. And that has really interested me. And so, partnering that diverse background with the coaching and with the podcast, especially when you have a podcast, you naturally are put in a position of like expertise. Like, I have
Mhm.
this expertise to share with the world. Um, and I love that. And I think that teaching, like the main foundation of a lot of my career is teaching dance. And then when I got into teaching yoga, they totally opened up my world of different ways to teach, different ways to use my voice, different ways to carry the space, different ways to give people feedback about their bodies. And so this mixed montage of background and training and certifications, I feel like I just use it. I
Right.
just use it. And so I am a certified coach and I get booked now to lead workshops and by universities and different health organizations, and always getting booked to like teach people how to live with less stress and how to like thrive, which is why I named
Right.
my podcast Thrive and Thread, because, especially at the height of the pandemic, our well being, our mental state, our emotional state is just as important as everything else. Um, so, yeah, that's a little bit.
Right. No, it's great. I mean, it's you're busy and you took the opportunity during the pandemic to, expand, right?
Mhm.
And sort of go from just being a dancer to now becoming an instructor, a teacher, right? Of other things as
Mhm.
well, helping and
Mhm.
giving back, right? So let's go back to when you were young, right? Because
Yeah.
how I know you is from dancing. I
Mhm.
met you and you were a dancer, and we were in the same scene. So didn't know much, right? But how did you get involved with dancing? Is it something that you grew up with, or
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, it definitely started when I was a kid. Um, I think my first dance class was a ballet class at the age of 6. And then my dad is also a ballroom dancer.
Mm,
So my dad dances, and my brothers, even though they're way older than me, they were the ones in the clubs like winning all the dance contests. Like,
wow.
they dance. So it's in my family. And I started in ballet and modern, like that studio kid, but I didn't grow up in a competitive space. It was always more artistic driven. So I was introduced to modern and jazz like even before going to college. Like a lot of
Wow.
dancers, if they're going to pursue dance in college, that's when they first get their taste of like modern dance. But I was grateful to have that experience of being in a studio. And then when I went to college, I was like, hey, if I'm going to be here for 4 years, I'm
Yeah.
going to do something I actually like. I was teeter tottering between studying psychology and dance, and I went the dance route. And then after college graduation, came back to the DMV and I joined Culture Shock DC. And that's where I got a lot of my like street dance training, where I first
Yeah.
was introduced to locking and house and whacking and even breaking.
Mhm.
So I pay a lot of homage to Culture Shock. And then at the time, there was a crew called GNC Crew, which Gary Buford and Chris Law founded.
Okay.
And so I was a part of that crew. And that's where I also got a lot of experience of like going to New York and Atlanta, performing on these stages,
Mhm.
including World of Dance choreographer. It's called Carnival.
Okay.
I don't know if they still do it. So started in the studio and then studied it in college where I really refined my ballet and modern technique, which then further influenced how I approach street dance and how I approach choreography.
Right. So you
Yeah.
basically grew up around dance,
Yeah.
decided in school that you were going to pursue dance because, I mean, it was already a part of your life,
Mhm.
joined Culture Shock,
Mhm.
and then really sort of learn other styles and like more than the style, the just the community, right? Because
Yes.
each
Mhm.
dance style has its own community for the most part. I was also in Culture Shock. I don't know if you knew that.
No, that's
Um,
wild.
when Culture Shock first came to Washington D.C., I was like one of the first, breakers on that team.
Wow.
That had to be honestly now I don't even know, maybe 17. I don't even know. Let's not even talk about all that. But it's a long time ago,
Yeah.
right? And I learned a lot as well because being a b-boy, a lot of times we don't learn choreography.
Mhm.
It's not easy. It's a skill, and I was terrible at it. But I try to keep up. But still, it helped me with my breaking
Mhm.
because it helped me to get a little bit more organized, especially in competition. Right, you're going out there performing. You can't you can freestyle, but usually you can't do it all the time. You got to still have a little bit of sets and a little bit of routines. But I learned that from Culture Shock, and it was a great experience. So for you as a dancer, now you have your own school. I see you doing all the styles. So basically, you grew up with it,
Yeah.
and now you're facilitating those styles for other people so that
Mhm.
they can also learn and expand their dancing, vocabulary, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the Lions Den.
Yeah, the Lion's
Yeah.
Den. Um, so the Lion's Den first came to be when I think it was like 2015. It's before I even had a name. I was just like, yo, I want to teach a dance class to my friends where they don't have to pay an absurd amount of money. And, back then I didn't realize like I was exercising business skills. So I like rented a studio, made an ugly flyer with one of those cheap apps, and just kind of put it out there. Hey, I'm teaching a choreo class every
Mhm.
Tuesday out here in Vienna. Come on out. And then that really was like the foundation of like what we see today. I was just marketing my own class, taking, checking off who's coming, taking in the money, like just kind of doing it all by myself. And at the time, I didn't think it was a business. Um, and then I was also more involved with the street dance world. So I had the choreo class, and then I had a open style session. So we had people coming from like
Right.
DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and like some of the best street dancers were
Is
there.
it like open
It was
practice?
just like open
Okay.
practice. I mean, like the people that were there were like Jekko and
Yeah.
Castro and Gabe and some of the Crump community. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was doing. And then that just kind of evolved, and then eventually I opened up a space called Baha'i Base
Mhm.
with Chris, and that place had its season. And I will honor that time frame of my life, and that season ended. We didn't have the space anymore, and I took the time that I needed to heal because when things end like that, there's a huge effect that it has
Yeah.
on us. So I took my time to heal, and then 2017, I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring back my choreo class. I'm going to bring back my class. And I found, well, through a church friend, she was like, yo, Lauren, this Safeway in Alexandria has a conference room. It's free
Mhm.
and you can do whatever you want with it. I was like, hell yeah. So I went to Safeway. I talked to the general manager, and I rented like the Tuesday night for the rest of the year.
Mm.
And
At a
again,
Safeway.
at a Safeway in a
What?
conference room, no windows,
Yeah.
no, I mean, it was like facing the street, but there was no sound system, there was no AC. Like I had to bring my own speaker, and it felt very much like breaking down a church or putting together a church because we'd have to like move the table and like stack up the chairs, and then we'd have this dance class. And that was like really like the reinvigoration of the Lions and coming back. And then I started inviting people to come teach. Like I brought Gabe to teach. I had um, people in the Crump community come teach. Like
Mhm.
I just started inviting others to teach so it wasn't just me. Cause in my mind, I'm like, yo, they got to be sick of learning from me. Like, let me bring some of my friends who are
Right.
dope. And then that really started to become the model. It was like once a week, a new teacher every
Mm.
week. And then finally got out of the grocery room in the
That's
grocery
what's up,
room.
though. I mean, so if you think about it, like, so you had your own space, Baha'i base. I think that
Yeah.
means home
Yeah.
base,
Home in
right?
Tagalog. Yeah.
Right. And so you had your own space. You had to kind of transition,
Mm,
and it is hard, right?
mhm.
Because you put all your energy, and a lot of times people don't understand how hard it is to have a dance business. I mean, you have a lot of people who depend on you, right? So it's
Mhm.
tough. You got this grocery store session going on. People are showing up,
Yeah.
and it has to say a lot about you as well, right?
Mm,
Because you're putting it together. Like I said, it takes a lot of energy to
it
do that,
does.
right? And the fact that you were able to kind of like restart and
Mhm.
start from basically from the
Yeah.
ground up is always the best way to start, I think,
Mhm.
for business people. Because when you become successful, a lot of times those stories, if you don't have that story of the struggle, it's hard to reflect back and sort of have that foundation where you can sort of pinch yourself every now and then and say, you know what, I remember how I started, and it wasn't easy, but I made it through, and then here we are now, Lions Den. Tell me about your classes. Tell me about how, what it means to you as a company, as a, a
Mm.
dance community.
Well, I appreciate you, even providing the platform to share this story because you're right. Like, if we take the lab, for
Hmm.
example, people only see the success it is right now when they look on
Hmm.
Instagram or, they come to a class and they see it thriving, but they don't know the nights that you didn't get sleep or cried about it
Right.
or, literally blood, sweat, and tears.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, having that chance to start over, it requires a certain humility, right? And there was definitely a fear that I would not be able to succeed because Baha'i Base was thriving when it ended,
Hmm.
when the space ended, is the way that I could say. And that's why I think the Lion's Den has had so many different evolutions, and Baha'i Base was, a form of that. Um, but now, I mean, honestly, I was just taking skill sets that I already had worked in other spaces. So,
Right.
I used to run a lot of Digs Deeper events, which was
Okay.
JoJo
Yeah, I
Diggs
remember.
freestyle
Right.
event, right? So
Mm.
I cultivated a lot of skills of like learning how to put on events and how to reach out to people. There was an organization called Kodachrome, which was this nonprofit that a couple of my friends created back in the day, and we were a thriving organization as well. And my role there was to select all the choreographers. So it's like I was taking a look at what I had and what I naturally do. It's
Hmm.
easy for me to like call on people and be like, "Hey, you want to teach?"
Yeah.
And then it feels good to provide an opportunity for other people. And then, secondly, having the mind of knowing what the people would want too,
Right.
right? Like, yeah, I'm very particular about who I ask, and I'm very particular about the energy that's within the Lion's Den. Like, hey, I know you may see other studios do it like this, but here at the Lion's Den, it's not like that. It's
Yeah.
about this, right? And so I think you really have to know who your people are and stay committed to the type of energy that you want to keep generating.
Hmm.
Because the moment that that energy changes and it's not aligned with the vision, then like that's when things,
Right.
go
Yeah.
awry.
Right. No, it's the lab, for example, right? It's an interesting thing, honestly. I'm still trying to like we were talking about how difficult it is. It's still difficult,
Hmm.
and then taking on another one, I mean, that's also a challenge too. But the way I see it is that if you don't challenge yourself, what are you doing? You did it once, you can do it
Oh,
again.
absolutely.
And that's all about growing, right? Growing up as an adult as well is taking chances. And at the end of the day, when you take chances, and people see your effort, that support is there.
Hmm.
It happens. I see the kids dancing, and I'm like, "Ah, I can't believe like they're growing up with breaking,
Mm,
and if it wasn't for the coaches, the teachers that we have, they wouldn't continue. So that energy is number one.
absolutely.
They bring that energy, they inspire the kids, the kids fall in love with dance and then they don't give up. They keep going. So same thing, right? You got to bring that energy to people because at the end of the day, as you know, organizers, you're inspiring people,
Yeah.
right? So tell me some experiences you've had with the Lions. Then you know, maybe some of the like challenges you had getting started, or some of the moments where you felt like, man, I can't believe that how amazing this is.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about one of those moments that you've had.
Mm. I think the hardest thing is for me personally is having to, you're like, you have to keep face sometimes. Not that you're being fake, but like if I'm struggling, like how do I still show up without putting that on people, right?
Hmm.
So I think like to answer the first part of the question as far as like challenges is my challenge is that I'm renting space from different people.
Right.
And so I have to remember that how one studio owner was like maybe different from the next studio
Mm.
owner. One
Okay.
one person's expectation may be different from another person's expectation. And then also I have to keep reminding myself like this isn't my physical space. Like I rent here, right? And then this inner battle of like, okay, should I get a brick and mortar? But then
Mm.
there's all those millions of things that come with having your own space
Mhm.
and the cost,
Mm.
the financial cost, the emotional cost, all that. So I think right now, like a challenge for me is like, I have to just trust where the Lion's Den is going. Like, if I think 5 years from now, I'm like, yeah, potentially we could have our own physical space if we grow in that way. Right. But as far as the other part of the question, like one of the greatest moments was recently when we had our heartbreak dance battle at the block, which was just a few weeks ago. Um, it was our first in-person battle since before the
Oh
pandemic,
wow,
and we had 150 plus people.
that's what's up. It's a
Yeah,
nighttime,
it
right?
was nighttime.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
want it to be nighttime,
Yeah.
but
Right,
again, when you're
but
renting space,
right, I mean,
you're
but
given a
also
certain time frame.
people, you know, it's nighttime. People want to have fun, so
Yeah,
it's like, and then they're getting out. There
yeah,
hasn't been an event. You haven't had it since
yeah.
before the
There's a lot of
pandemic,
good factors.
right? So you need that sometimes. Like you take it away, and then
Mhm.
people realize, like, man, you
We
know, it's
need
coming
this.
back. We
Yeah,
need this, right?
yeah.
So tell me, you know, obviously you're an organizer. You do events. You organize workshops. You're
Mhm.
doing so many different things.
Mm.
How do you manage your time? You know, what's your day like? I mean, you wake up, you must, you know, be working all the time.
Mm. Now I feel like I don't work as often. And I think people are always under that impression. Like I don't have a full-time job. Like I'm my full-time job. Like the Lion's Den is my job. The podcast is my job. Coaching clients and leading workshops. And then, I teach like 2 to 3 studio classes where I teach like
Mm,
youth hip hop and then like an adult bar and yoga class. Um, but yeah, I think that's something that I'm still working through. And like when you're an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, did I do enough today? Like, did I hit the
yeah.
mark? Like, how do I feel about today's progress? Can I go to sleep with peace?
Mhm.
And for me, it's like if I covered my top 3 for the day,
You're
then
good.
I'm cool.
Yeah.
Like I've really had to get to a place where I'm not burning myself out.
Right.
I don't work 14-hour days. I don't work 8-hour days. My day may be filled with different things, but as far as like my brain being used, it's like a good 4 to 5 hours a day. It
Mm,
depends. And I'm the type of person that needs to do something different every single day.
right. Yeah.
And now, in this current moment that we're sitting here, I'm trying to revive my artistry as a dancer, as a performer,
Mm,
because I've been so much in the organizer seat, the community organizer seat, that my own dance, I feel like kind of took a back seat. So I'm like in that space of figuring out, well, who am I as an artist? What do I have to say? And now is the time to do it because we're only getting older and
yeah.
our bodies are
Right.
changing. And
Tell me about it. Yeah, telling you, like I'm teaching again, right? The pandemic happened, and I said I basically said I'm going to retire from teaching breaking. Like literally, I'm like, I retired, and then the pandemic hit, and then I had to teach because I had to teach from, you know, remote on Zoom and all that other stuff. So it was hard. So I had to basically I never stopped. And then now I'm back in the studio. I'm teaching breaking again. And you know, I'm older too, right? But your body it does take a toll. Especially a lot of people don't realize how hard it is to teach.
Mhm.
Like dancing for yourself and having fun and doing your thing is
Mhm.
one thing, but when you have to teach, and do things slowly, especially with breaking. I'm on the floor.
Oof, it's a
Like I
lot
look
on your
look at that.
body.
See, I have a bruise right
Oh
there
my
from my
gosh.
hands being on the floor, but I'm proud of it, right?
Mhm,
Because I grew up, my father doing construction, working hard, nonstop, having bruises. And I'm like, I feel like a piece of me and a part of
mhm.
me is just like my dad, just in a different way,
That makes sense.
and anyways, I'm having fun, and it actually helps me to feel younger, I guess, because the kids have so much energy. So if I have low energy, forget about it. There's nothing going on, right? So I
Mhm,
got to go in there, and really prepare myself physically and mentally, which is one of the things I wanted to learn about yourself because I so obviously I follow you on social media, right? I'm not as active, right? But I follow and I see what's going on. I like to keep to know what's going on in my community and also like around the world
mhm.
with dancing, especially, right? And some of the times I see you dancing, I feel like you're so free. And I've always wanted to, like, oh, no joke, I've always wanted to like know what that's like that saying people say dance like no one's watching,
Mhm.
right? And it's just been like we were talking about it before we started. It's always been a challenge for me. How do you do it? Is this something that as a kid you grew up and you were always like really outgoing and you didn't, you weren't shy,
Mhm.
and then it kind of goes into your dancing? Or is this something that you build up and you build up your confidence to feel like, I don't really care what people see? How do you do that? Like, what goes on in your mind to like just let go?
That's such a good question, and as you're asking that, I'm, like, trying to figure out how did I how did I get to that point to just be able to
Hmm.
turn on my phone and, like, dance, which a lot of people do now, like, especially since we're in such an era of, like, TikTok and
Right.
IG reels and stuff like that. I definitely feel like I've retracted more. So if you've seen anything recent, it was a push for me to do that.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I think we go in waves. Like if my body changes, then I
Hmm.
feel like my skills change. If I feel like my skills have retracted a little bit, then I'm more shy to get on camera, right? And like that's human nature. Like you want to show that you're awesome.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, well, you know what? I want to show that it's okay to not be amazing. Like it's okay for me to just swirl my leg and my wrist and like it not be a trick or anything, and the type of dance that I do, like it's not super athletic or,
Right.
aesthetically like ballet or even
Right.
breaking too. Like I'm always amazed and in awe of y'all. Um, but for me, I think when I do that, I'm inspiring someone else to like put themselves out
Right.
there. And that's always my goal is for anyone that's in my space is just for us to feel comfortable in our body. And I think, like anything, the more you practice, the more confident you get. And that's something that I say to a lot of like newer dancers. Like, with consistency comes confidence.
Right.
And if you're not consistent with it, you're never going to feel that confidence. And that's something that's true for me now as someone who's been dancing for a long time. If I'm away from dance for a week or 2 weeks or a month, and then I try to get back in it, I'm
You
like,
you feel it?
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
how do I move? But I think coming back to having fun, and a lot of us forget like why we dance. Like we're so caught up in like, I have to produce content and I have to like gain these views so that I can create engagement, or, I need to have an Instagram that says book me and I look bookable. Those are the things
Mm.
that professional dancers are thinking. And for me, I'm just like, I'm more than just a dancer. I don't want to just get booked. I just want to do what I love every single day, which is why I've dived into yoga and coaching and, podcasting. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
another means of self expression. And to me, they're all connected. Like, if I know my voice and I know what my values are, that's also going to show up in my body and how I move. Like, there's a sense of like maturity of like, I know who I am. And you can see that when someone dances.
Right. What would you say? What is your style? Like, what do you?
I've asked this question myself and like other close friends, and they were just like, Lauren, you're a dancer, you're a mover. I don't really connect or say like I'm a house dancer. Like I feel like if I say that, that means I need to be practicing it all the
Right.
time. And I don't. And if I'm a modern dancer, I'm in that world. I am someone who loves to move. And when the music comes on, I'm going to give you what the music is giving me. That's literally what it is.
Right.
Um,
So it's
yeah.
more like self-expression. You hear the music and you sort of you're a dancer, so you just whatever comes out,
Yeah. I mean,
whatever
and
you
that's not to
feel.
say that someone should not train in styles. Like I move the way that I move because I've trained in so many different styles.
Mm,
And that blend, like the ballet and modern background, is my underlying foundation. And then you put some house on top of that, some hip hop, some popping, and even some crump. Like I'm attracted to all these styles. And so I will play in those styles. But
mhm,
when it comes to the moment of like you turn on a song, I'm not necessarily going to give you one style. I think that would be great training for me. But where I'm at right now, as far as the trajectory of my artistry, I'm more about like, I want to create art, put it on a stage, and let people feel something. So, whatever means I need to do to get you to feel something, I'm going to do that.
right, and that just comes through practice, right? Um, different styles, tapping into everything. Like you were just telling me about yoga. So now you're a yoga instructor as well.
Yeah.
And so you're, I mean, that's what, like I said, really trying to figure out like how you have the time to do that because when you are teaching, when you're doing the podcast, when you're doing, your yoga classes, bar classes as
Mhm.
well, right? And then you also have the Lions, then it's full time, right? Do you do everything by yourself or do you
No,
have
no,
a
no, no.
team?
So, like, here's where I'm telling you, like, when the pandemic came,
Mhm.
I stopped teaching so much. And some people teach a lot. Like, kudos to you because that's a lot
Yeah,
of work.
it's work.
Um, I I'll dabble. Like, I've had to really get clear on like what excites me, where am I leaning towards? And I think that there's a season for everything. So there was a season where when I first got yoga certified, which I don't remember what year it was a couple of years ago. That was my goal. I'm like, okay, I want to get as much practice in yoga, 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 right? And then bar, um, because I have ballet training, bar came really easy for me to teach. And because I also had yoga teacher training, it made my bar teaching even better because I know how to call out and cue moves
Hmm,
and things like that. And so all these experiences in different styles like yoga and bar and meditation literally leveled up how I teach anything.
right.
So my dance teaching became more clear and articulate because of all my diverse training. Um, the pandemic showed us that there was another way of living.
Right.
At the Before the pandemic, I was like, "Oh, this is normal to have to drive to 3 to 4 different studios in one day
Mhm.
and, make my money." Now I am in a position where I am very intentional about what I say yes to. So I've scaled back the weekly classes.
Mm.
Even though I'm a great teacher, I recognize how tired I am after a
Right.
certain amount of hours. So I'm like, well, if I want to be able to teach great classes and really invest in those, and I need to pull back how often that I'm doing it.
Mhm.
So I've scaled back on that. And then the Lions Den, we only offer one class a week. And that's the wild thing about it. Like, I would
Mm.
love the Lions Den to have more than one class a week, but it's hard when you're renting from a studio because they're
Right.
busy all the time. It's hard to find space. But I do have an incredible team of people that help me with design,
Mhm.
help me with the newsletter, help me with events, help me with signing people in at the door, connecting with our teachers. I've cultivated this really solid team who their values align with mine
Mhm.
and they're mutually benefiting from what we're doing at the den. So to answer that question, I am very particular about when I do certain things. So, like, Monday is my most energetic day. I'm the most creative. So, I'm not going to book a bunch of meetings on a Monday.
Right.
I'm going to keep Monday open. And then I know that I have lines in at night. So, I'm going to make sure to not overdo myself during the day. So, I have energy
Mm.
in the evening. Right. And then, same thing if I'm coaching clients, that's about an hour. I know that I need to decompress for 30 minutes at least
Right.
before I go to the next thing. I mean, there are people out here who do Zoom calls after Zoom calls after Zoom calls, and I can't do that
I'm
no more.
telling you, right.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know how people do it.
And so it's like spacing out your day, and I'm huge on energy management, not time management.
Mhm.
So I make my week according to my energy levels. So Monday and Tuesday, I have the most energy. Wednesday, I start to kind of get really tired. Thursday, it kind of comes back up. And then Fridays, I've saved Fridays to be like fun, creative days. So like that's when I
Mm.
go to the studio and create because I have a show coming up, which
Okay.
I
Yeah.
would love to talk about that. I have a show coming up. And then yeah, I mean, even like a podcast like this, like I'm gonna decompress after
Right.
this.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So you basically Like, I like that a lot because you go by the energy
Yeah.
and knowing yourself that on Monday, this is when I'm the most
Mhm.
creative. So I can't go and be in Zoom meetings or
Mm-mm.
be go to the office and talk to somebody because I got to be creative
Gotta
today.
maximize your
So
energy.
how did you figure that out? Is it just through growing up and getting to know yourself a little
Yeah.
bit and right?
Um, this is part of like the stuff that I teach. So I've also hosted a ton of retreats during the pandemic. I host a retreat called Root to Rise, and people meet with me at 7:30 in the morning for 5 days in a row.
Mm,
And like we do a meditation and we do movement, and then I would teach on a different topic. And so taught on energy management. It was one of the most popular concepts for a lot of people. Was oftentimes you think to do the easiest task first, and then by the time you get to the really important task, your brain is tired because you've spent it doing dilly dally things like
right.
emails, right? So there's this
Yeah.
concept called eat the frog first, which means, and I don't always subscribe to it, but you
Hmm.
do the hardest thing first. Once you have that hard thing done with, then everything else is a breeze. But oftentimes people are doing like the administrative things first in their day. And then you push off the most important thing. Like I work with a lot of creatives, like as far as being my clients. And I'm like, yo, if your full-time job is a creative job, but you're trying to make time for your creativity, you're going to be depleted by the time you get home and try to work on your art
Right.
or your passion project. So
Hmm.
as far as energy management, I journal daily. So I track how I feel when I wake up. I also write down like, hey, you got 4 hours of sleep last night. Today you feel groggy, you feel like crap,
Right.
right? So I really know myself. So you need a practice. Everyone needs to have a practice of like knowing themselves, whether that's journaling or I don't know what it is, maybe talking into your phone. But I've found that I'm the most excited on Mondays and Tuesdays because it's the beginning of the week. Wednesdays is when you feel like, okay, I'm tired and we're not close to the weekend yet, right? So I've carved out things that I can look forward to throughout the week so that it doesn't feel so,
Right.
oh, it's just
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
work. But when you're blessed to do what you
I
love,
know it's pretty
it's
amazing.
amazing,
Yeah,
right?
no, for me too. Like, I used to like work nonstop. Like, literally, you had to stop me,
I
or
believe
people
it.
had to remind me that like you got to take a break. And I would throw an event, and then everyone's going home. After I was done, I was already planning another one,
Yeah.
and I was already like editing video and putting things together for the next one. And so that's great because what I talk to people about is about having tolerance, right? To work hard
Mm,
because a lot of times people give up, right? If they don't get those results right away, they
yeah.
tend to just, maybe I
Hmm.
can't do it. But building tolerance by challenging yourself and doing more than maybe you thought you could, right? So
Hmm.
for me, I've got my day planned out, not like you, not like, so on Monday I do this, Tuesday I do
Yeah.
that. But for me, it's more about working and focusing 100% of my energy into everything while I'm there. And
Yeah.
then when I'm not there, I'm just, out here just hanging out. But I put all my focus. I go teach, I walk in, it's showtime, and I'm here, it's showtime. Everything I do, I really put all my energy
I
into
love
it.
that.
But I was never like, I didn't grow up like that, right? So
Hmm.
again, I talk about my family a lot on the podcast just because I feel like I grew up and I have a business doing what I love, right? And like my father worked in construction and like having this dream and this dream that I'm living, it's not really like a thing that I grew up with. Like my
Right.
parents never said, you know what, someday you could become a professional dancer. Like they never really said that to me at
Well, they
all.
didn't know
They
either.
didn't know it,
Yeah.
right? And then through life I just learned to work hard. Like I got it from my dad, right? But focus 100% and then take a break.
Mhm.
Focus 100% and then take a break. So that's how I manage my energy. I kind of go in bursts, right?
Yeah.
If I feel like I have a lot of energy after this, I'll go running. It doesn't matter what time.
That's wild.
If I feel like I sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm working till about 7 in the morning, then I take a nap and then I work all the way till maybe 12 a.m. and then I do it again for days in a row. But that's when you feel inspired, right? Like I'm sure like with you when you feel inspired by a project, it just consumes your all your energy. You just focus on it 100%, right? And I'm assuming like with Lions Den and all the work that you're doing, putting events together, and now with things opening up again, that that energy is kind of coming back, right? So do you have some events that you're planning, say in the springtime or coming up this year?
Yeah. So I have my first commission show,
Hmm.
meaning I have an evening length production that I'll be hosting at Joe's Movement Emporium. I'm part of their arts incubator project where they give select artists a certain amount of money to put on a show, and so this is a big deal for me because I've never put on a full length production. So that's happening April 30th and May 1st, and
That's
I
what's
would
up.
love for you
Yeah.
and your family to come out. The show is titled Nanay, which means mother
Mother.
in
Right.
Tagalog. Wow, you know this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know a few words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the show is exploring the concept of the mother wound, which is generational pain that has been passed on from our grandmothers to our moms to our daughters and so forth due to living in a patriarchal culture. Um, so exploring that topic in an evening length show. So that's coming up and being presented as like Lions Ends, like partnering with the Joe's movement to put on that
Right.
show. And then I'm hosting an event in May, which no one knows about just yet. You're the first to hear this. It'll be May 21st. It'll be called AAPI Ignite. May is Asian American Heritage Month. So I'm putting on an event to amplify different AAPI artists. So we'll have like an AAPI DJ,
Hmm.
performers, food, and things like that. That's
That's what's
coming
up.
up. And what else is coming up?
So this show, you choreograph everything and
Yes.
like you put it all together, costumes and everything, or
Yeah. So I am choreographing the entire thing, which
wow.
is a lot because I'm used to choreographing one song
Yeah.
at a time. Now my brain is juggling 6 to 7 songs at once,
Hmm.
while teaching it to other dancers and refining it,
Right.
and turning them into full pieces. So it's new. I've never done this before,
Right.
and I'm approaching it with compassion and like an open heart and an open mind of like, okay, Lauren, like trust the process. Like you will get
Yeah.
through this. It's
Right.
going to be awesome. You have an awesome squad that's doing this with you. Um, so yeah, I'm picking the songs. Um, as far as costumes, I'm the one. I'm not making costumes,
Right.
but I'll be like, hey,
Yeah.
this is
You
what
have
we're gonna
right. Right.
wear, or maybe I'll reach out to someone for help with that. But what I'm learning is, where my strengths lie and where I need to ask for help, and that's huge.
Hmm.
So
So with choreographing, a whole show, right? Obviously, it's new. It's exciting, right? Because you've done it before, but now it's
bigger
it's
scale, yeah,
longer and on a larger scale. It must feel really good to see people doing the moves that or the pieces you put together, right?
yeah.
Right? How do you like? What's the process of coming up with a piece? Like, how do you start? Because
Mm,
I can tell you when I'm putting together like a set, I'll usually pick like one move
mhm.
and then I'll build around that, right? But how do you do it for, just dance in general? Like what's your process for coming up with a piece?
Yeah, I think it depends. Like if you're in a show that has a certain concept, then it's like, okay, that's the prompt. Um, so for this, it was like it's about the mother wound, which is, a sensitive topic. Because I'm also putting my dancers in a space to unpack their own mother wound. Um, which has been interesting. So what I'm also noticing is that I'm taking the practices that I do personally, which is reading and meditation and journaling, and I'm incorporating that practice into creating these dances. So if I'm asking my dancers to touch on a sensitive topic or a hard topic, I at the same time as the choreographer am responsible for holding the space for them while they do that.
Mm.
Um, so the first song that I choreographed for this show, I was just the great thing about Spotify is like it recommends songs that are like similar to what
Right.
you're already listening to. And I'd started making this playlist of what potentially might be in the show. And they recommended this one song and I played it and I was like, oh my gosh,
This is it.
this is perfect. Like this is and so I started with what felt the most natural. So the path of was it least resistance or something like
Yeah,
that?
that's it.
I'm like, okay, this song immediately speaks to me. I naturally am moving to it. Let's start here. And then a lot of my choreographic process is improvising, listening to the music, improvise what comes out. Oh, that felt good. Let's keep that. And a lot of repetition, repetition, repetition. But I'm driven by emotions and I'm driven by music. So if I know that, okay, the audience needs to feel this in this particular part of the show, we're going to create movement that embodies that. And what does that look like on your body? What does that look like on my body? And
Mm,
what's the story that we're telling here? So Nanai is, I'm taking the audience through the different stages of healing when you recognize you have a mother wound. So the very first thing is like recognizing your inner child when your inner child is hurt. What is she or he looking for? What are they
mhm.
looking for when they felt alone or scared as an inner child? And so yeah, emotions and music
Right. So
and
it comes
improvisation.
natural for you. I mean, so speaking with Maspas, right? I was asking him about the same similar question, like how do you come up with an art piece? Like where do you see it somewhere? Is this how do you get inspired by it? And like artists, a lot in common, that
Yeah.
you just feel it. It feels natural for you, and your eye, your creative, the way you think, it's all together. And whatever kind of inspires you to create something on the spot. In your case, you heard this song on Spotify. I mean, Spotify hooked you up, right? They sent you a song and then you heard it and you're like, you know what, this is it. And then you create movements based on what you feel
Mhm.
and on the music, and you kind of put in it, you can envision it, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and I think too, like the important thing to think about as creatives is, well, what do we do when we're not inspired? And that's what I've been
Uh,
working through is, okay, now I just have to have a creative discipline. I just need to show up at the studio regardless of how I feel about it, right? And so that has been the new thing for me is like, what does a working artist do in their, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
besides
right.
from like me hosting events, like what does a choreographic process look like for me? What informs that choreographic process? What do I need to do to get in a creative headspace to even make movement? What type of warm up do I need to do for myself to feel good to dance like that? Do I want people in the space? Do I like being alone? And like as of recently, I was like, oh wow, it's nice to have at least one other dancer with me while I'm
Mm,
making this because then I can give it to them and then I can watch them as
right.
opposed to by myself doing it and watching it
Yeah.
at the same time and then
Right.
like judging it in my own head
Hmm.
versus another person's body is like, hey, that actually felt really good. Let's do this again. Um, but yeah, I right now that's something that I'm really exploring is like what is a creative practice? What's a creative discipline? I read a lot about writers and I think the influence that I've gained or the insight that I've gained is from like the writer's process. Um, and I try to take that and mold it into like a choreographic process. But even looking at what I naturally do, like I told you, like I love meditation, I love journaling, I love reading, I love learning. How can I take those learnings and incorporate that into the art that I create? So the show Nanai was inspired by my own healing journey of like recognizing that I have a mother wound
Mm,
and you have a mother wound and you may not even know it, but the essence of this mother wound is um our relationship with our mom sets the tone for all the other relationships. And so I take these inner workings of my mind and I want to put those types of messages on the stage because it's a topic you don't hear a lot about. There's
yeah.
also a father wound. I'm like, maybe that'll be a sequel to the
Uh,
show. Who knows? Um, but I'm deeply passionate about healing and wellness and mental health. And because of the pandemic, a lot of us have done our own healing journey, right? I
mhm,
even had a healing journey around being a mixed Asian person, like I'm part Filipino, part Polish.
mm,
What does it mean to be mixed race? You know, the things that come with that. Oh, I don't feel Asian enough, but then I forget that I'm like part white at the same time. So where do I stand in that? What's my identity in that? And so the questions that I have about life, like most artists do, um, I try to get those answers through movement and I try to bring other people on to do their own healing. So like the dancers that are part of my show, I've had to educate them on what the mother wound is. And I've had to be careful with that too, because it's eliciting certain emotions for them
right.
depending on their childhood.
Hmm.
So
Right. So, um, you got a lot going on, right? I'm excited about your show. I'll definitely come check it out. Just send me
thank
some
you.
info. I'll also spread the word.
Yes.
I I love going to shows, so this is perfect, and supporting you and seeing what you're doing
Thank you.
with the artist and even the story behind it. I think it's awesome. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you see yourself, say, I don't know, hopefully it's 20, 30 years from now. Like, do you living this life of a
Mm.
dancer and having so many people around you that you're inspiring? I mean, you really are giving back. That's what you do. And, as a dancer, sure, you dance, but also more than anything, you're giving people a platform to express themselves, to build confidence,
Mhm.
to do so many different things. So as you grow, they're all kind of coming with you as well. So
Mhm.
where do you see yourself in the next, few years? I know I said 20, 30 because, you know, that's where we're headed,
Mm.
hopefully, right? But just think about it for a second. Where do you see your dance career and everything that you're doing the next, few years?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the business evolves as I evolve. And I'm deeply connected to, I have to be interested in it. So if I were to lose interest in anything that I'm doing, I would
Right,
have to pass it on to someone else. Right. But I don't think that this love for movement and community is going anywhere. So as I get older, the community is getting older. Right.
right,
But understanding, like, is there going to still be a need for this specific type of community 10 years from now? I don't know.
right.
So you have to stay flexible. You have to think about, am I providing something that the community needs and even wants? So that's something that I'm always exploring. But as far as, getting older and like having a family and things like that, I definitely see myself wanting to explore choreography more
Mm.
and still dancing. Like, I don't, if I'm, when I turn 40, when I turn 50, there's still so many dancers that age that are dancing
Yeah.
and performing. And so I hope to be doing that. I hope to pursue writing on a different scale. I want to grow my podcast. So all the things that light me up and excite me, I want to continue that and grow that in whatever capacity, you know, life provides. But very much as long as I am pursuing what I love and I am having a harmonious life, meaning I have time for my family, I have time for, vacation
Right.
or, I I'm not the type of person that's like, let me work hard up until 60 and
Yeah.
then
And then
enjoy life. No,
retire
it's like, no, I want to enjoy life now,
now. Yeah.
and I have a stepdaughter and like learning how to parent and being excited to be a part of her journey. If she considers to continue pursuing dance, we have her in some dance
Oh,
classes
wow. So
now.
she's dancer
Yeah,
too.
and she's
Okay.
amazing, right? And so just exploring these new identities. And I think a big thing for me is I haven't learned a lot about my Filipino culture, so that's something I want to explore more in the next
Right.
10 years, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. So continue to learn.
Yeah.
And it's all about learning at the end of the day, right?
Mhm.
Because it's all about that, right? I'm really happy to have you. Honestly, like I love everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Um, I'm a huge supporter, and I met you, years ago, and then we didn't see each other for a long time,
Yeah,
just because life and stuff,
life.
right? But I kept up. Again, thank you for coming on.
Mm,
I really had a good time,
me
and
too.
hopefully, like I said, we'll do it again, and we'll keep on building. So
Keep
thank
on
you for coming.
keeping on.